Hey everyone, I'm Sean Salmon, Vice President of MCLE and Professional Development here at Quimbee. Joining me today is retired civil rights attorney Sam Cohen. Sam is based in New York, and over his career, he has successfully represented numerous prominent activists, groups, and journalists in a wide array of legal proceedings. Today, Sam will be providing us with an overview and update of the First Amendment. This interview will cover the basics of the amendment, the original intent and present application, recent SCOTUS and circuit court decisions, and more. So, Sam, to kick things off, can you talk to me a little bit about, actually breaking down the amendment? Like, what did the framers have in mind at the time?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sean. And thanks to everyone at Quimbee for having me here to talk about the First Amendment. We're going to talk about the history of the First Amendment first because there's quite a bit in the text. It is a dense amendment. They started off the Bill of Rights with a bang. The text goes that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So there is a lot there. Compared to like the Third Amendment, which is just about quartering of troops, there are 5 freedoms that are enunciated there, or 7, depending on how you do it. But I like to think of it as 5. The first is that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And we're going to get into what both the establishment and free exercise clauses mean a little later. Or abridging the freedom of speech. That is the second freedom, or of the press. And we're going to talk about that. The freedom of the press at the time of the framers meant something very different than it does today. And similarly, the fourth freedom, the freedom of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, we'll see meant something very different to the framers than it does now, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So all of these things are really in the bedrock DNA of American civil culture. And we take them for granted a little bit, but I think it's important to think about what the framers really had in mind when they put all of this together. The first thing is we don't really have an idea these days of what an established church is in America, because the framers were so good and the American experiment has been so good at eliminating it from our life. But in England, at the time of the American Revolution, the Church of England was a state-sanctioned religion. It was the established Church of England. And what that meant was that the canon law of the Church of England was recognized and enforced by the government of England. So if someone was, say, a Catholic and didn't go to a Protestant mass with the Church of England, that's something that theoretically the state could prosecute them for. Also, what that meant was that this established church, the Church of England, had the exclusive jurisdiction over religious matters like marriages. So if a wedding may or may not be recognized if it was performed by a different religion.
And I was about to ask, so if that church had exclusive control of marriages at that time, a Catholic or Jewish marriage just wouldn't be recognized at all by the state?
Well, they generally were, but the problem was that the state had the option, and that it was within state power. And a theme that we're going to see in a lot of the First Amendment rights is limiting the capacity of the state to abuse its power over what people say or believe. Because this is a temptation that power has. And it's not so much that England, famously was nullifying Jewish marriages or Catholic marriages, but membership in a church, in the Church of England, was really a prerequisite to participation in civil society, to the point where census numbers were determined by parish records. If you didn't go to the church, you weren't counted as a member of that community. And so this is something that the framers were largely people who, or a majority of them were people who came from denominations of Protestantism that were part of what had been called the Glorious Revolution in England, about maybe 50 or about 100 years before the American Revolution, where the monarchy was temporarily overthrown by Puritan people who were protesting against the excesses of the government. The King, Charles at the time, was both religiously very intolerant and also stole a lot of people's money. And the people got fed up with it and overthrew him. And so there is a recent memory that things didn't have to be this way in England, there was a time within living memory of the people who came to America that the Church of England wasn't in charge of that. But then it went back to being that way. So they had these tantalizing hints of what it could be. And we see those in the First Amendment throughout.